evening, everyone. Welcome to Garden Hour and thank you for joining us. Garden Hour is a weekly program brought to you by SDSU Extension, members of our horticulture team and special guests, with the goal of providing you with timely updates and answers to your gardening questions. As always, we invite you to ask questions throughout the program, and please put those questions in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. I'm tonight's host, Kristine Lang. I'm an assistant professor and extension consumer horticulture specialist based in Brookings and serving the entire state of South Dakota. We're really excited to have two special guests tonight, but the first person joining us this evening is going to be Dr. Amanda Bachman, SDSU Extension Pesticide Education and Urban Entomology Field Specialist. And Amanda, what cool insects are we going to learn about tonight?
I've got some stuff on leafcutter bees and then a little bit of a mosquito update.
All right. Okay, I was out hiking and camping this weekend, so I have some opinions about mosquitoes. Next up on tonight's program, returning from a Garden Hour, her Garden Hour debut last year, and joining us again is Anna Barr, SDSU Extension Farm to School Nutrition Field Specialist. And Anna, what will you be talking about tonight?
Thanks, Kristine. Well, if you happened to be on when I was on last year, we talked about the Grow Getters Youth Education Program that was developed in 2020. And in the last year, we've been working to update that, give it a little more South Dakota twist, some more originality, and make them a little more robust. So I'll be sharing what those lessons look like this year.
Excellent. So it's come full circle. Wonderful. And last but not least, in making her Garden Hour debut is Sydney Trio, McCrory Gardens Education Coordinator. And Sydney, what can we learn about from you tonight?
So tonight I'll be showing you some about what's blooming at McCrory and then some upcoming events we'll have.
Wonderful. We look forward to seeing those blooms, and McCrory Gardens always has wonderful events. So we look forward to hearing about that. And I'll be rounding out our program tonight, also talking about some gorgeous blooms. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to let Amanda kick off the show.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you see a picture of a monarch, fingers crossed. But I just wanted to let folks know that I have been seeing monarch butterflies here in Pierre, South Dakota. My common milkweed is in pretty much almost full bloom in my yard. And this is actually a female monarch, and it was this morning. So she was kind of doing more nectaring and warming up. I didn't see any egg laying behavior, but I was looking because I totally want to rear one or two out if I get a chance. And I just wanted to go to the Monarch Watch Map. So this is the map of the first sightings of adult monarchs. And so I blocked my little key here, but after June 20th is the sort of dark burgundy color. And you can see that it was early to, mid-June where some observations were coming in from South Dakota. So if you've got milkweed, take a look. Monarchs are here. They're moving around. The one that was in my yard was a little bit faded looking. So my guess is it was one that came, from somewhere to the south of us. It wasn't one that, had reared out here. So monarchs are around, and hopefully folks get a chance to observe these really cool insects in their own yards. And I wanted to talk a little bit about leafcutter bees. In some cases, you don't actually see the bee itself, but what you will see is what they do to leaves. And for whatever reason, I think this is like an ash seedling or something. Dr. Ball's not here to correct my tree ID, but you can see that it's got these semicircles taken out of the leaves, and leafcutter bees will do this. They don't eat the leaves, but they actually use them to line their nests. So they are some of our solitary stem nesters. So they'll make holes in, rotting wood or, use hollow stems or whatever, and they'll line those holes with the leaf pieces, have the pollen ball lay an egg, seal it off, and keep doing that the entire length of the hole. Sometimes people will see this damage to leaves and wonder what they can spray to make it stop. And there's really nothing that you can spray to make it stop. We don't have really any, foliar pesticides that are, labeled to kill leafcutter bees. They are a beneficial insect. They're some of our native pollinators. So seeing that kind of damage on your leaves, it indicates that you've got a good local native bee population and that you should let them do their thing. If they like plants that you also like, you can physically exclude them from the plant with like netting or a cage or something like that, but there's really no way to stop them. And I would encourage you to think of it as like a cool sign of activity in your ecosystem versus, damage to the plant. Also, plants can handle a lot of defoliation, like it'll be fine. But I did just want to point out the cool leafcutter bees. I usually see evidence of them, every so often in my yard. And for whatever reason, they do seem to prefer these little ash seedlings. And with the holiday weekend coming up, I wanted to talk a little bit about West Nile virus. West Nile virus is a mosquito vectored virus. It moves between humans and birds. I believe horses can be another sort of reservoir for it. The symptoms that it causes in people can be very much easily confused with other illnesses, not the least of which is COVID. So it is something that if you're feeling, fatigued or flu-like symptoms, it's, important to get tested and also, let your doctor know that, hey, I've been around mosquitoes, like you should probably test for this. But I wanted to put up the map, or not the map, the graph of cases from last year. I don't believe we've had any reported cases yet so far in 2022. So this is the summary data from 2021. And you can see that last year we had a case reported in June, and then you see July is really when it's starting to tick up. August last year was our biggest month. Last year, overall, we had less than 50 cases statewide, which is fairly low for South Dakota. However, we've had years where we've had, over 100 or over 200 cases, and we can sometimes have the highest per capita rate in the nation because we don't have that many people, and also Aberdeen is built on a swamp. So Brown County folks, you guys are kind of a West Nile virus epicenter. Sorry, make sure you're wearing your repellent, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next slide. We talked last week a lot, got in the Q&A about repellents, and wear one with an EPA approved active ingredient. You are never going to get me to tell you to put something on that you saw as a recipe on social media. EPA approved active ingredient is where it's at. And some repellents have sort of new little infographics that are approved by the EPA. An example of one is here. It'll tell you what arthropods it repels against. So in this case, the label is for mosquitoes and ticks. Sometimes it's just mosquitoes, sometimes it's just ticks. And then it tells you how long it repels each of those for. So in this case, mosquitoes 4 hours, ticks 6 hours. So depending on how long you're going to be outside, that gives you some information easily on the label as to how often you need to reapply. Also, for keeping mosquitoes from biting you, long sleeves and long pants, and avoiding activity at dusk and dawn. I've noticed in my yard here in Pierre, areas that have some taller grass or taller plants, that's where mosquitoes really enjoy hanging out. And if those areas are in the shade, the mosquitoes will just be like, hi, how are you doing? So, avoiding activity in those areas, keeping some things trimmed up might be helpful. But yeah, physical prevention, so avoiding when the mosquitoes are out, and also noting that the vector mosquitoes for West Nile virus are most active at dusk and after dusk. So it's not every species that vectors West Nile virus. The ones that are sort of day flying, those are just what we call our nuisance mosquitoes. But yeah, personal protective equipment, long sleeves, long pants, and then wear a repellent with an EPA approved active ingredient, and definitely take that seriously this holiday weekend. We see a lot of people outside spending time in the sun, on the water. You might forget about your insect repellent, and then, this is where we start seeing our uptick in West Nile virus cases. So stay safe this weekend, and I will turn it back over to Kristine.
And Amanda, it does look like we had a veggie question that I'm going to get to at the end of the program, but we've got a couple of insect questions coming in now. So the first one, is there a yard treatment for mosquitoes that is not harmful to beneficial insects?
No. Like pretty much the short answer is kind of no. There are Adulticides that have a short residual time, so that if you apply those around dusk when the mosquitoes are active and your beneficial insects are not as active, that can be a way to target mosquitoes and avoid the insects that you want to keep around. However, you want to make sure you're reading the labels and, you know, checking on some of that residual activity. Honestly, better than treating your yard is going around and looking for water sources. Clean out your gutters, empty your watering cans, make sure you're emptying your bird bath regularly. These are all like the non-sexy things that are harder work than putting out a spray. And honestly, putting out a spray correctly is hard work. But there are a lot of those physical and cultural things that you can do to reduce your local mosquito population. So mosquitoes don't need very much water to develop in. So even if it's just, you know, a little, you know, a saucer underneath one of your potted plants, make sure that you're dumping that out regularly, because especially with these hot temperatures, mosquitoes, you know, can go through their life cycle pretty quickly. So empty the water. And then what about chiggers? Wear your repellent, wear your long pants. If you're in an area that you know has chiggers, when you are done being in that area, go inside, change your clothes and take a shower. That's the best way to get them off your body, because you're not going to see them. They're a small mite. They're the immature form of the trombiculid mite. They will feed on you and then they will fall off to continue their life cycle. They do not stay embedded in your skin. You can paint yourself with clear nail polish if it makes you feel better, but it is not suffocating the chigger. They also take a little bit of time before they feed. So they will like crawl up your body until they reach a point of resistance. And then that's usually where they hang out. So if you're outside weeding and you know that there's chiggers in your backyard, when you're done, go inside, take a shower, and that will really cut down on the number of chigger bites you experience.
Excellent tips. I think we're going to be well prepared for the weekend and for gardening. All right, so our next guest this evening is Anna Barr, and she's again going to be talking about the Grow Getters program. And if folks are still thinking of questions for any of our guests tonight, please be dropping those in the Q&A, and we'll welcome Anna and give her a chance to get her screen pulled up.
Thank you. Let me yes, get this presented. Oh. Oh, 1 second. There we go. All right. As Kristine said, my name is Anna Barr, and I am the Farm to School Nutrition Field Specialist. I'm a dietitian by trade, and so I'll give you a little bit of details on Farm to School and then get into our Grow Getters portion. What is Farm to School? You might hear about it. I hope you hear about it. I think that it's becoming more popular, but then again, I'm immersed in it. So Farm to School, as defined by the National Farm to School Network, it enriches the connection that communities have with fresh, healthy food and local food producers by changing food purchasing and education practices at schools and early care and education sites. So not only the K-12, but the pre-K as well. And this is accomplished through 3 different core components. So a Farm to School program could include any one of these 3 components or all 3, and at varying levels. So a Farm to School program could be doing all 3 of these and be really successful, or it might just do one once in a while, and that is also a successful Farm to School program. So these include local procurement. This would probably be the first thing that comes to mind when a local food is purchased from a local agricultural producer and sold at a school in meals or snacks, or maybe an after school care program like a Boys and Girls Club. Another aspect is gardens, school gardens or summer gardens, when students can engage in that hands-on learning about foods in a garden that they tend to themselves. And then the third is education. So really anytime students are learning about where their local food comes from, why it's healthy for them, and how it is produced. So the Grow Getters portion that I'll get to soon will be kind of in that educational aspect of Farm to School. Why Farm to School? There's a few different studies, lots of studies out there that kind of categorize into these areas of who really benefits from Farm to School. So we get students winning The biggest benefit is that we're seeing students eating more fruits and vegetables. A lot of times farm to school is done with fruits and vegetables, but do want to note that in South Dakota, beef and bison are very popular, especially with our growing seasons. There's just not as much research around the benefits about that since it's not as common as fruits and vegetables. Schools win. The staff oftentimes eat healthier because they're promoting it to the kids and recognize the benefits themselves. Producers win, gain an access to a market. Schools are oftentimes the largest restaurant in town. So thinking about it that way, it's really a big audience to sell local foods to. And then communities win, that local economy boost, as well as even some community attention around media, noticing these great programs and promoting what the school and community and producer are doing. You might find yourself on this list of who could be involved in farm to school. The most obvious ones are those who grow agricultural products, whether that's a rancher, a small vegetable producer, a gardener, a pre-K through 12 educator doing that educational side, and then the school food service or any child feeding service. But over on the right are all those who can support farm to school programs too. So if you have students in your family, if you are on the school board or PTA, if you run a after school program or help with a food bank or food pantry, or if you do if you're a chef, anything like that, can definitely have a hand in farm to school programs. All right, so now to talk about the Grow Getters program. So this is a garden-based education for preschool through 3rd grades, and I'm just going to lead us through the website where you could also find this information yourself. So I think Evan is going to drop this address in the chat box for you. But if you scroll down here, Grow Getters, we first start with that overview. So this really is a set of educational lessons. We want youth to learn about where their food comes from and how foods are grown. It walks through the gardening process, and everything is standards based. I'm going to scroll past this for just a second and down to our previous lessons. If you've been here before, if you were on this last year, you probably recognize that Grow Getters was first in 6 lessons, and they looked something like this. Our master gardeners worked together with myself and our master garden program leader, Amy Ladonsky, on creating this first set that pulled together outside resources so that people at home with their kids, especially during the COVID pandemic, could use these resources to teach their kids about gardening. And so the difference between what you see here and last year's program, which is still available and still can be used, is that now we're focusing on updating the lessons to be, 1, more specific to what is grown and harvested in South Dakota, and 2, to include more original materials by SDSU Extension. So we've been using master gardener volunteers, again, wonderful volunteers that have education experience, to write lessons. The first one is currently released. We will be adding 4 more throughout the season, and they will include soils, seeds, pollinators, and then one that crosses between harvest and preservation. So watch this website. They'll be coming out, especially if you are on the Garden and Yard newsletter. You'll see them come through there too as they're released, but we're currently getting those ones finished, and they'll be releasing throughout the summer and fall. So each lesson is divided into a pre-K and kindergarten component, and then a 1st and 3rd grade lesson. So that's a little more age appropriate for those 2 groups. Some of the activities in them are the same if they're appropriate for both, but we've just kept them separate so that it's easier for an educator to pull it and say, I want to use this. So that's one thing about this set of lessons, is that they are more designed for educators with classroom settings, but not to say that they can't be adapted to use at home with 1 or a few children too. So walking through each activity, each lesson has 3 different activities in it: a science activity, a nutrition activity, and a physical activity. And in this one, the titles of each of them are there. Each lesson will be linked to educational standards in South Dakota specifically, so not like our national ones, but specifically what educational standards could people use in South Dakota. There's also an equivalent early learning guidelines that we link to in the pre-K and kindergarten lesson. So after the standards, we move on to a book recommendation, and anyone who's doing this lesson could simply go and try to find this book to purchase and use it along with the lesson, or watching a video read aloud that we've linked here would be another strategy. We move on to vocabulary. Some key concepts in first through third intro to gardening lesson are listed here. This is a unique component in the first through thirds lesson. Pre-K through kindergarten, we haven't put vocabulary in for them. And then it moves on. So we've got our first activity here is the science activity. This one was teaching youth that plants need light to grow. So we're looking at the different conditions of darkness, shade, and full sun, to experiment some themselves and learn what that light is necessary for plants to grow. So we walk through a bunch of different guiding questions that you could use if you'd like when doing this activity to guide the conversation with the youth. If this is something you're comfortable with, then you wouldn't need to follow that necessarily, but it's there if you'd like. There's also modification notes with each activity. So if maybe youth are a little older, there's some extensions that could add some added skill to it. Advanced, they're creating graphs now. Even more advanced, they're doing quantitative measurements. So really including that STEM in the garden. So lots of different ways to adapt there. This one had a specific worksheet that went around with it. Our nutrition activity, what will my garden taste like? What a fun one throughout the seasons, trying the different fruits and vegetables that are available in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. And I think we did even add a little idea here for winter, maybe trying those canned foods, or this just gets kids excited and tasting about different fruits and vegetables. Similar, again, guiding questions, some modifications, some extensions. And then for physical activity, this one was location, location, location. So each of these activities, as you can see, this one is the introduction. So it's kind of geared towards where does a garden go? What does a garden need to grow? But all of these are geared back to that main science component. And then teach a physical activity alongside with that, or teach nutrition to kind of bolster that main topic. So here they're looking around and walking around and running around the outdoor space to try to find where the best sunlight is for a garden to grow. And with that, we end each of them with additional resources that we have through SDSU Extension in our nutrition capstone and our horticulture capstone, with different resources that could be helpful. So there is the example of one of our Grow Getters lessons, and the pre-K through kindergarten one is very similar, so I don't feel the need to show you those details. There is a different book, and in this one we had the same activities, but they were a bit different. They just have the same title and were tweaked. So I will stop sharing my screen now and take any questions if you have any.
Anna, thank you so much for that overview. And if folks have questions for Anna about Farm to School or the Grow Getter curriculum, this would be a great time to drop those in the Q&A. And while we're waiting, Anna, I think about my sister takes my niece to a daycare that is actually based in an apartment, so they might not have access to outdoor space. What ways does Grow Getters curriculum maybe still apply to teachers or early childhood educators who have indoor space and aren't able to take the kids out in the garden as easily?
Yeah, that's a great question. And accessibility is something that's always on the forefront of our minds in Extension. And so we have made this lesson something that you don't need much equipment or supplies to do. So the monetary cost is low, and it can be adapted for multiple settings. So we kind of went in with the assumption that maybe they don't have this, and we still want you to be able to get started. So thinking about that, what does my garden need to grow? That reach for the sun activity at the beginning it really is done inside with a window, or even in full darkness to begin with. So that's an example of one that a lot of these don't need a garden. Even the last one, that location, just a sunny outdoor space. So some of these will be better, and that's great if we can really get kids in a garden and touching those plants and looking at all the different colors and the senses and engaging in that space. But it's definitely possible to do any of these without a garden. And some of those notes are in the modification section.
Excellent. All right. We have a clarifying question. Is Grow Getters a free source for anyone to use?
Yes.
All right. And that again can be found on our SDSU Extension website. And those links are being shared in the chat. Now, Anna, I have a similar theme to the question. If I have small people in my life in a school in South Dakota and I think farm to school sounds awesome, what sort of resources might I share with their school, or how could I get involved in making some of those connections if I'm a parent or a grandparent or a concerned aunt or friend?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that if I welcome anyone to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you'd like to make a connection in your local area. I might know someone or know someone who knows someone. So feel free to use me as a resource. And then we do have a guide. Maybe I can have Evan quick find this one too and share the link, but it's the Farm to School Resource Guide. And this is currently going through its second version of edits and should be out in the next month, but it's got lots of great information in there now. We'll just be adding to it. The same link will work. That walks through what is farm to school, how to build a farm to school team, the basics of like how do you procure local foods and is that safe, and what are the requirements for school lunch programs. And it really does include a lot of that basic information. It's a great place to start.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. And I see that that resource has been shared in the chat. And if you're willing to share your SDSU Extension contact information in the chat for all of our guests, that would be wonderful as well.
Yes, I will put my email.
And again, if folks are thinking of questions for Anna, as you know, sometimes it takes time for those to percolate, feel free to drop those in the chat. And we're gonna welcome next Sydney Trio, Education Coordinator from McCrory Gardens. And Sydney, we'll let you get your screen shared and turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
All right. Well, first, thank you, Dr. Lang, for inviting me. I'm excited for the opportunity to share what McCrory Gardens has to offer. So first up, a little bit about me. I graduated from SDSU about 2 months ago. I am a horticulture major and a sustainable local foods minor. I started working at McCrory Gardens as a sophomore, so about 3 years. And I just did part-time as a garden crew, so the annual like weeding and all that. But now I have the amazing opportunity to be the education coordinator and horticulturist. You can see in this picture right here, those are some of the kids that I get to work with this summer. They're from GAP, which is the grade after school place, and they come every Tuesday and Thursday. We have kindergartners and 4th and 5th graders. So that's a little bit of the children's education we have in the summer. And then I also give some tours there. And I'll still work out in the garden. So I'm getting hands-on learning as I'm growing. And then a little bit about McCrory. It is a botanic garden, and there's about 45 acres of arboretum where they do trials on NC7 plants. And then the formal gardens is about 25 acres. And there's a bunch of different themed gardens, which I'll be showing you some of the plants that are blooming right now in some of those gardens. So this one's pretty cool. It's called Red Birds in a Tree. You can kind of see how the birds in the tree there. I just think that's a really cool one. And then this one, you can't smell it in this picture, but it actually, if you rub your hands on the leaves, you'll get this popcorn scent. This is in our yellow garden because it produces these yellow flowers, but all parts of this plant is poisonous, so you don't want to eat it, but you can enjoy its smell. And then we have this pansy, which is pretty cool. The variety is brush strokes, and they all look different. So that's pretty cool. Kind of like someone painted it. And then we have 4 o'clocks, which this is in our hummingbird garden. And supposedly they flower at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and keep its flower until the morning, and then it'll close up and then open again at 4 o'clock. And the genus is actually Latin for amazing or awesome. So that's pretty cool. And then this Celosia is one of my favorites because they just have a unique texture and cool colors on the leaves. And the stem is actually the same color as its little plume it sends off. And so like this one, you can't really tell on this, but it has a red stem, and then that one will have an orange one, and then the yellow ones will have a yellow stem. And then this one has a cool texture on the petals too, which is a moss rose, and most of them are solid colors that I've seen. And so this one's cool to have that pattern on there. This is outside our children's maze, and we went with bright colors, so this adds some more color too. And then this is our Indigenous garden, and so we use the 3 sisters method, which we grow corn, beans, and squash. And we have the corn providing the height for the beans to go up, and the beans provide the nitrogen, and then the squash provides a ground cover to hold the moisture and prevent weeds from coming up. And then this is my favorite tomato in our vegetable garden. We have a few different varieties of tomatoes, but this one is pretty cool because it has the purple coloring on it. And then this is what it looks like now. This was from last year, but soon it'll turn that red color and you can eat it just like that. And it tastes pretty good. And this is another one of my favorites. It's called Kooka Melon. It's like a watermelon, but in a cucumber, and it tastes like a cucumber, but they only get that big. It's a vining plant, and people put them in salads or just eat them like that. And then some of the upcoming events we have in July, it's National Moth Week, the last week. We're still working out the details for the date, but we're going to be having a moth walk at night, and we're going to be walking through the gardens, and we'll have sheets with some lights to discover some moths. And then August 5th, we'll be having our annual garden party ice cream social from 6:30 to 8. Traditionally, we usually have it on one day, but this year we're going to be having a new 2-day garden party. And on the August 6th, we'll be having the Garden Expo, which will be different vendors, booths, and then we're going to be having garden talks. Dr. Lang is going to be giving a talk, and then we'll have a band, food, and lots of fun. And then we'll be also having our annual Insect Fest on September 10th, and Amanda Bachman is a co-host for that, and we'll be having cockroach races, a bunch of booths, and pollinator parade, and a bunch of fun. So those are some upcoming events happening at McCrory. Yeah. Is there any questions?
It looks like we do have one question in already, and I'm going to have some more, Sydney, but again, I'll give folks a chance if they have questions or clarifying questions about what's in bloom. So the first question is, what variety of corn was used for Three Sisters? When I tried it, the beans overwhelmed the corn and everything ended up collapsing on the ground. I added the word collapsing just for dramatic effect.
So this year we did a bunch of different varieties of corn. I can't remember them all, but we did like sweet corn, regular, like the regular corn, and we're gonna see what works for that.
Excellent. And I'll piggyback on that response. I was actually just reading today an article in the Seed Savers Exchange magazine from an Indigenous woman who was talking about planting Three Sisters and talked about the time that it does take to sometimes find the right beans to pair with corn. Some of the really aggressive pole beans might overwhelm the corn, and also perhaps staggering your planting time of corn and planting your beans a bit later, because I too have had a situation where I tried a Three Sisters planting in Iowa and we used a really aggressive pole bean and it also collapsed the corn. So dramatic effect from lived experience. So Sydney, I know we had gotten this question once from someone who was looking to visit McCrory Gardens, but obviously the derecho did go through Brookings. It took out a lot of trees in the park in my backyard. I showed some of the derecho damage photos in terms of the high tunnel. How did McCrory do in terms of the derecho, and would it still be worth, a road trip across the state to visit this summer, or should we wait, or should we come?
Yes, so our formal gardens had only a few trees down, but we got it cleaned up a few days later and the formal gardens are good to go. The Arboretum had a few trees down, but they're getting taken care of and everything is as normal.
Excellent.
And it also gave us some more room to plant some new trees. So yeah.
And some exciting new species, I'm guessing that would make Dr. Ball very happy.
Yes.
Excellent. So if folks are looking to visit McCrory Gardens, what are your hours? How much does it cost? When can we find you?
So we are open every day from 10 to 6, and you can find the prices online for the admissions. Yeah, we're open every day.
Excellent. And if folks are interested or looking for private tours, is that something that you offer, and who should they contact?
Yes, so I am the tour giver, and you can go online also under event, or it should be on the website, and there's a tour tab, and you'll send me an email.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, Sydney and Anna are going to continue to hang on the line if folks have questions, and we'll maybe just round robin at the end. And so to round us out, I am happy to let you know that apparently when my extension colleagues ask for certain things, we need to be careful what we wish for, because asking you shall receive. I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about hail damage across the state, and Rhoda Burrows had some nice pictures and some nice discussion about hail, and she asked for more hail pictures. And on July 20th, we got hail in Brookings, and so I let her know that I would have some hail pictures for her. So just to share a photo to commiserate, we got pretty lucky in Brookings, and I know this is old news and I missed some of you last week, but I show this photo. This was the immediate damage after I had stood shaking my fist at the universe for our hail, and also expressing gratitude that it only lasted for a few minutes. But we had some quarter to nearly ping pong size hail. And in my own personal raised beds, because that's the space I could assess right away, I did notice most of the damage on my larger leafed plants. So the Swiss chard looked pretty battered and beat up. The Nasturtium had some tears. As we went out the next day and walked our pepper research field, we did see some small dings and tears. And one thing that was really interesting is it does sometimes take a while for that damage to show up, as some of you may have experienced as well, because you start to see the browning and yellowing around those torn, tattered edges. These plants are now starting to come out of it. This is a good opportunity to take this leaf and make a salad out of it and let that new growth emerge. Again, with hail damage, it's good to give those plants, if you have severely damaged leaves that are already, half broken off, just snapping those off at the base of the plant or the next growing point to reduce those disease entry points is really important. And as those plants start to regrow and have new growth, that would be an appropriate time to fertilize. But thinking, oh my gosh, it hailed, I'm going to dump a bunch of fertilizer on it, and pushing a bunch of green growth from an already stressed plant, that's not particularly helpful. So again, just giving it a little bit of time. The other thing we're noticing out in our fields, so Just to clarify, the photo on the left is a damaged, tattered nasturtium leaf. It's not a pepper, by way of example. But we were out walking in our pepper fields, and my graduate student was out there today, and we're trying to keep an eye out for what is the actual cause of damage. So we're keeping an eye out for torn, tattered leaves that are still recovering from hail damage. And then we're also keeping an eye out for any new insects, pests that might be making their way into the area. And Amanda, I was going to invite you in on this one if you've got any other additional tips about what insect feeding damage might look like versus torn, tattered hail damage, and also to confirm my ID on this little critter.
Yeah, so one thing with caterpillars is it can be super helpful to have something for scale in the photo. So just FYI for future reference, but I'm pretty sure that's one of our white line Sphinx caterpillars. So our Sphinx caterpillars all have that like horn on the end of them, is a really diagnostic feature. A lot of times, you know, there can just be like caterpillars that are green and have nothing else identifying about them. And those are the ones that we're like not going to get you to species on, but they all do the same kind of damage as far as chewing mouthparts. They eat plants. And yeah, so like the tear from the hail damage, insects, especially caterpillar herbivory, like if you've ever watched like a monarch caterpillar eat or like a black swallowtail caterpillar, they sort of have a pattern. Like they'll go from like the end of the leaf and kind of like munch down to the stem. So there usually is, you know, kind of a little bit of a pattern to how they're eating. And they don't do like the tears like you see with the hail damage because they're consuming that entire leaf. But there is a lot of, you know, biotic and abiotic damage that can mimic herbivory. So it's really important that you have a body before you go out there spraying an insecticide or a fungicide or something, because you could be just putting chemical out there and it's not going to solve your problem because you're, say, putting a fungicide out there and you've got cabbage white caterpillars. So always have a body, and we've got the plant diagnostic clinic to help us out with you know, disease diagnosis as well.
Excellent. I like that reminder to always have a body, and that was the take home I was fishing for. So you read my mind. And also, you know, while you're still here, Amanda, thinking about those thresholds a bit as well. So this is the only one we've seen in this field so far. We're going to keep an eye out, but you know, I'm not ready to sound the alarm bells on a control method yet. We're going to keep watching things and watch these plants come out of hail, and I'm not going to spray bomb my pepper field tomorrow.
Right. And the other thing too is keeping in mind that certain caterpillars can be species specific as far as what they're going to eat. Yep. And so that's why I like to see size on caterpillars, because if it's some of these Sphinx moths can get pretty big. And so if it's a big one and you see it crawling on the ground like that, it might actually just be looking for a place to pupate. And so it's not going to be doing any sort of more feeding damage to your plants. So yeah, identification is important. And sometimes insects are just passing through and they're not out there to yeah. to get involved with your plants. So
excellent.
But yeah, it looks like white line Sphinx has a pretty wise host range, like some things in the prunus, ironically likes the 4 o'clocks that were mentioned. But yeah, for some of these, they also turn into some really cool big moths. So I'm inclined to let them, do their thing.
I do now have a rearing cage, so maybe I'll just start rehoming things and see what beautiful creatures they turn into. Excellent. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so I've decided to start sticking with this theme of gorgeous blooms for those of you who have been seeing some of my prior weeks. Maybe I have too much time on my hands. Maybe I just really enjoy drinking coffee or hanging out on my deck later in the evenings and watching insects visit my plants. But I'm a little bit obsessed with this bee's friend, which is an open pollinated seed that I got from a Midwest seed source. And I had to write down the pronunciation to make sure I got it right, but it is pronounced Phacelia. And for those of you that maybe have farmer friends or farm connections or farm yourself, this plant, Phacelia, is starting to get a lot of conversation around it for use as a cover crop, on wide scale cover crop on farms. It is in the tansy family, so there are a bunch of names for this flower. It's called like blue tansy, and I thought this one was kind of cool, but like scorpion flower, and I think that has to do with the beautiful curvature of the blooms. And for any of you who have grown some of the other heliotropes as annual bedding plants, this is in that same genus. This is a really drought tolerant plant. It is also does quite well in cold soils. So after the last, after the last frost, when soils are still warming up, you can put that seed out. I direct sowed this in raised beds on my own balcony. And what's really interesting for comparison is everything else. So the bright orange you see in the background is calendula, for example. The rest of the flowers in this garden were started from transplants. So they had a leg up. And the Phacelia was direct sowed and very quickly started out competing the other annuals. I'm going for a wild look in this flower bed, but I can see why it is being encouraged as a cover crop, because it is aggressive and competitive and is shouldering out the other plants, which is an advantage of cover crops if we're trying to, smother out weeds, for example. Interestingly, the lamb's quarter seeds in this garden do find their way through, but they're smaller than everything else. Just want to call out these beautiful kind of fiddle leaf, if you will, or fiddlehead flower blooms. So there's that lovely curvature, bright purple color, very ferny. Again, I think the foliage is absolutely gorgeous. And the bees, they are staying true to name. I've been seeing a lot of bees visiting this, and my cat is poised to pounce, which is not going to end well for the cat. So if you're looking for a unique plant to add into your garden and you're really into the lavenders and blues, I kind of have a lavender and orange theme going myself this year. This would be a really neat plant to consider. My strategy with this plant is going to be deadheading after blooms, saving a few plants to go to seed. If you're using these in an in-ground garden, they are going to self-seed very readily. Even in my raised bed, I'm going to be interested to watch, with the self-seeders, with our annual plants, the winter soil temperatures, we'll get freeze out of roots for perennials sometimes that are being saved in raised beds. But with annuals, I expect I'll see some seed germination in this bed again next year. So I look forward to saving this seed and having it to enjoy again. Apparently, I'm really into blues and lavenders this year. This kind of happened just how the cookie crumbled, if you will. So the other gorgeous bloom is Borage, which is known as an herb plant. Most notably, a lot of folks will take the leaves and the flowers and they'll kind of steep them in a lemonade or a tea or an adult beverage of choice. And what they are known for is their delicious cucumber flavor. This was first pointed out to me when I was a graduate student in Iowa State. And when the faculty member pointed it out, I looked at them cross-eyed and thought that they were crazy, that I was going to eat these flowers and they were going to taste like a cucumber. But sure enough, they do. Another common name for this plant, you might hear people call it starflower, which I think we can all agree on why it might have that name. And this one too is being visited by a lot of bees, and I'm noticing different sizes of flies. Again, I'm not an expert on native bees or flies, but I'm seeing other insects visiting these plants as well. The leaves can also be consumed. Some folks might, use it in a salad. One thing to note is you can see in the close-up photo of the flowers, it's pretty bristly. I wouldn't say it's like a thistle prickly necessarily, but definitely bristly. So if you've got sensitive skin or skin sensitivities, this might not be the plant that you want to like go rub into and touch. But also for me, from a palate standpoint, I haven't committed to chomping on the leaves. One thing to note, if you do harvest the leaves or flowers and dry them down as an herb, that cucumber flavor is going to go away. So that needs to come from the fresh greens and the flowers. Again, this is an edible plant that is safe to eat. If you're going to start making a diet of borage and borage alone, you might start to notice some liver issues. There's just some low-level toxicity that could cause issues with liver. So if you already have some pre-existing liver issues, probably stay away from borage in general. But if you're using it to add some flowers to a salad or add it to a drink, you should be okay. I'm starting to see that some of my bottom leaves are starting to get a little bit battered as they get, knocked around in the wind. Borage, both of the plants I've shown are full sun. Borage can take some shading. The spot I have it in is kind of a gradient from the plants that I'm showing in this photo get the most sun, and the plants that were cropped out of the photo, which I should have left because it would have been a great example. They are shorter and they're not blooming as prolifically. So borage will do well in part shade conditions. It's just not going to grow quite as fast or tall. And with these plants, I'm going to be kind of doing a hard shearing back, if you will, to about halfway down the plant and see how they come back from there. Also, that can be a really great pre-vacation strategy as we're thinking about long weekends, 4th of July. If you still have a family vacation coming up in July or August and you've got lots of containers or annuals, make sure you have a plant sitter or an automated drip system, or you're doing a lot of watering before you go. You're not adding extra fertilizer because you don't want to push new growth when you're gone. Move things to the shade if you can. And if you have plants that you're comfortable cutting back or deadheading, again, that would reduce the amount of water that those plants are going to be drying up or using while you're gone if you're going to be leaving for a week, for example. So just some things to consider as we head into the end of summer vacation season, because holy moly, it's almost July. And last but not least, I know you're all dying to know what I'm eating for supper tonight. I'm sure that was top of mind. So I'm excited to share that I'm going to be eating Tip Top Nasturtium. So Nasturtium, also an edible plant, both the leaves and the flowers. I was tasting a few of these last night in my own garden. The yellow and the orange are both from the same species. Again, that being Tip Top, or the same variety, Tip Top. So there's a lot of variation in this variety, from the oranges to the reds to the yellows, which is a fun thing about the open pollinated seeds. And you get a lot of variety from all variation in color from the same variety, which I like. And during my taste test, I was pretty impressed with the spicy, peppery taste of these flowers. So for those of you who like the really spicy mustard greens, Nasturtium might be for you. For those of you that table pepper is too spicy, Nasturtium may not be for you. Maybe try a petal at a time instead. But if you're looking for a way to jazz up your salads and have something really pretty on your plate that you can eat, this might be a really fun plant to incorporate. Again, thinking about the small humans in your life who you might be trying to get to try new things. If they're not afraid to try something that's a little bit spicy, encouraging them to eat a flower could be a really fun way to also encourage gardening. Adding the disclaimer that we can't eat all the flowers we see in the garden. So maybe having a safe flower to eat discussion versus letting them forage on everything in the garden, because that could result, that could end badly. So do take care in that respect. All right, looks like we've had a few more questions coming in. I want to circle back first to a question that came in at the beginning of the show, which was, most springs I have dozens of cherry tomato volunteer plants sprout in my garden. This year there were only 3. What is it about the past winter that prevented them from growing? So with those cherry tomato volunteers, it's more than likely year over year you're having those nice ripe tomatoes drop to the ground. That locular jelly, which is the gelatinous coating that you'll see around the seeds, that's had time to break down. And with those seeds, clearly in your garden spot, I'm not sure where you're located in South Dakota, but you must have some nice conditions that are preventing that seed from germinating until conditions are right. So a few of my hunches might be that, depending on the fluctuations on where you were in the state, if there was enough of a warm out that those seeds would have germinated, and then, we plunged back into cold conditions, soil temperatures were really cold again, that could have done them in. Another thought that might be in line with those cold, wet soil conditions that we had for so long, as Dr. Burrows has been showing us our soil maps week over week, that those seeds could have simply just rotted in the ground. I don't have a lot of great examples or experience with, having volunteer tomato seeds drop to the ground and grow year over year. So I think it's really cool that you get that and you're able to keep that fruit going. But my guess is potentially the cold, wet soils for the prolonged period might have just led to some rot, because tomatoes do need warm soils to germinate. The next question came in about the bee's friend. So being in the tansy family, do the flowers have an unpleasant odor? You know what? My husband is probably watching Garden Hour right now. I should ask him to go out and smell the plant and smell the flower and smell the leaves and report back. I have not noticed anything, and I'm typically sitting in a chair about 3 to 4 feet away from the plant, and I have noticed no unpleasantness. So far, it's only been pleasant. So from that distance, it's been good so far. All right, all my nasturtiums have white and yellow on the leaves. I'm following all the rules for them, I think. Thoughts on about what is causing this? You know what, Tracy? I have noticed some similar spotting on my nasturtium. At first, I kind of attributed it to hot winds that might have been leading to a little bit of leaf scorch. And the other thing I checked is I think I was overwatering mine as well. So I kind of had the tale of two cities. So, you know, I would be checking for if your plants are being overwatered, because we can see yellowing show up that way and start to see white, kind of, we call them like water soaked spots on the plant. And again, as we think about like a day like tomorrow where it's going to be really hot and windy, on the opposite side of that coin, keeping an eye out for leaf scorch. I've been seeing the same thing on the beans in my garden. They can be pretty susceptible to leaf scorch, which can be kind of the browning and crinkling. So if you haven't been overwatering, I'm going to guess leaf scorch, and or vice versa. So those would be my two initial thoughts. And it sounds like we've covered that. So does anyone else have any questions this evening? I'll invite all of our panelists to jump back, and you know, as we're waiting for a few more questions to come in. Ooh, we have a fun one, Amanda, for you. A 6-year-old granddaughter would like to know if dragonflies bite.
Okay, so I kind of hate the like, does this insect bite question, because physically, many insects do have mouth parts that are capable of biting people. However, dragonflies really don't bite people at all. They're usually zipping around and have absolutely no interest in using humans as a food source. They are predators, so they're great at catching other insects on the wing as they're zipping around. But that also means they do have some powerful mandibles in order to eat those insects. But I've never been bitten by a dragonfly in all of my years on this planet, nor have I run into anyone that's been bitten by one. So they're physically capable of biting, but they don't.
Excellent. And we've had a couple of guest clarifications. So I want to report back that my husband confirmed that the Phacelia smells great. He's not noticing any stinky odor. So we've got that. And then I want to thank Gary Mills for providing a good reminder that volunteer tomato plants and growing those tomatoes year over year in the same spot in your garden could lead to soil-borne disease issues, as well as potential splashing and foliar disease issues. So one note of caution, while the volunteer tomatoes might be fun and great and you haven't seen any disease issues, trying to rotate crops in your vegetable garden by family for at least 3 to 4 years would help break diseased soils. So excellent clarifications. All right, as we're rounding out the evening, Amanda and Sydney, what's one reason that we should put Insect Festival on our calendars for September? What's a fun activity we should look forward to?
I know we're going to have some hissing cockroaches to hang out with, as well as probably the cockroach races, which are always a good time.
Yes. Pollinator Parade is my favorite.
Well, it doesn't get any better than that. Anna, do you have any upcoming events or activities or places we could look for you to say hello across the state? I'm going to put you on the spot as well.
No big public events coming up. And then actually, yes, if you're in the Sioux Falls area, I am at the Lake Lorraine Farmers Market every other Thursday night from 4 to 7, this Thursday being one of them. There's a big kids event going on, and I'll have some kids activities similar to Grow Getters. So that would be a fun one to stop by in Sioux Falls this Thursday from 4 to 7.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and thank you especially to our audience. We're so glad you continue to join us week over week. And if you have gardening questions that you didn't think of tonight or we didn't get to, remember that you can always reach out to the SDSU Extension Garden Hotline. You can contact any of our 3 locations via email or phone, or dropping by in person, and they would be happy to work through gardening questions with you. And they also recruit a specialist so that we can dig deeper into those questions. And as always, you can find recordings of Garden Hour on the Extension YouTube channel, and you can find many of us back here next week, same time, same place. And we look forward to seeing you then. Have a wonderful evening.